and you are listening to Uprising the Asafo Edition with your host, Nana Gyamfi, and I am so happy to have in studio with me Jasmine Canick, selected as one of Essence Magazine's 25 Women Shaping the World, KCET's Southern California 7 Women of Vision, one of the most influential African Americans in Los Angeles under 40, and most recently, one of Los Angeles' most fascinating Angelinos by the LA Weekly. Jasmine Canick is best known as a TV and radio political analyst and social commentator on the intersection of pop culture, politics, and race. She works as a political consultant and occasional freelance journalist for a variety of news organizations. Good morning, Ms. Canick.
Good morning, Nana.
That's the last time we're going to hear me call you Ms. Canick. We're going to call you Sister Jasmine from now on. Very glad to have you here. Glad to be able to finally talk about what is going on with Jasmine Canick, the LAPD, this city attorney who is charging and prosecuting Sister Jasmine for allegedly resisting arrest, doing all kinds of stuff last November during the Ferguson protests, and we're definitely going to get to that. But leading into that, let's give some background to folks about who you are, because a lot of rumors about who you are. Folks can't figure it out, and what you've been up to. But you have been charged by the city attorney, in spite of the fact that they know that you're a journalist, and in spite of the fact that you've described even to the police that you were there at the demonstration as a journalist. What is the motivation, do you think, for what's happening?
The motivation probably has to do with my blog and the fact that over the past 2 years, I've broken quite a few stories that have embarrassed the chief of police. And so I feel that's their motivation. I think this is retaliation in terms of that. Now, I don't think it's retaliation from the rank and file, like the men and women who pull folks over on the street. I think it's retaliation straight from the top of the police department, which is Chief Charlie Beck.
Now, let's give some background, not specific background,
Okay.
You know.
Anything I say can and will be used against me in a court of law.
But let's give some general background to folks about how this even started. When we talk about the Ferguson protests, we're talking about the protests that occurred that week right before Thanksgiving, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, right before Thanksgiving, right?
Right.
And you were out there on all 3 days. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what were you doing out there, Miss Jasmine?
I was observing. And I was commentating, and I was feeling the pulse of the city and what was going on, and I was reporting on what was happening. I do a lot of freelance work when I have the time for different entities. That particular time I was doing it for another local radio station. And, in order to tell these stories, you have to go out there. It is very difficult to truthfully and honestly explain what is going on in a situation like that, watching it on television. You have to be a part of it. You have to go out there and experience it. And in doing that doesn't mean that you are yourself an activist, although there's nothing wrong with saying if that was the case, but it wasn't the case for me. And it's also not saying that when you do that, you have to go out there and break the law. I know on the first 2 nights, when I did hear there was 2 different law enforcement agencies involved. It was like the CHP and the LAPD. When I did hear them say, you need to leave this area, or you need to do this or do that, I complied and did exactly what they said. And went home each night, right? Mm-hmm. And then when that 3rd night happened, which was the night before Thanksgiving, it was a slightly different situation. And I think there were a lot of factors that played into everything that eventually ended up happening that evening.
Okay, before we get into that, when you talk about having to be there and be on the ground, I think, here at KPFK, one of the things that we pride ourselves on is that we are on the street. We have people on the street that are involved in part of what's happening and reporting from there, as opposed to, say, some mainstream media where they're really on the sidewalk and maybe on the bridge overlooking, and sometimes, not any of those places, and reporting on these things, right? And so even when we think about what was happening at Ferguson and how all these major news networks and news entities had people under tents and had people that weren't right there where the people were, who were sort of guesstimating about what the energy was and getting most of their information, frankly, from the police or from the mayors of these various cities. And so you had in some places in Baltimore and Ferguson, these various places where we've had people's uprisings on the issue of police crimes, journalists that are getting arrested who are doing what you're doing, journalizing, or whatever you call it, being a journalist, right? Trying to get the news and trying to see what's happening. Is this something that in your time that you've been doing this kind of work, that's something usual, or do you find that something unusual about that?
Well, I find it's unusual. But first, let me go back to what you said earlier. Yes, that is what KPFK is known for. I mean, I got my start in radio here at KPFK doing the news. So, that's one of the things I love about this radio station. But I think what we're seeing, especially in the past couple of years, is that there seems to be some disregard for certain types of media, right? So if you are from Fox 11 or ABC, you are likely to get a pass when you're out there. But if you're from a KPFK or a smaller radio station or a community newspaper, maybe not so much. And I think that needs to be part of the larger conversation that we have as a society too. We do not allow other entities to dictate who the media is for us. Had I not been out there, for example, those first two nights, there are certain stories that wouldn't have happened on the radio station I was dealing with because I was the one that was out there for them.
Right.
And that's really important, especially because, different shows and different radio stations speak to different audiences. And, like you said, there are different people who have their own particular ways of doing these stories and getting into the heart of the stories. You cannot tell the story from the outside. You cannot be a part of the drive-by media and tell the story accurately. You just can't, because basically what you're going to be doing is reading from a script that's been prepared for you by, some public information officer, which is not a knock to PIOs because I am one too, but that's not telling the story.
Right. And so you were there. And so on this third night, this is right before Thanksgiving, and there were folks who were kind of concerned. I'm talking about the general population, and mainstream media asking the question, what are the police doing? What are the police doing? And it seemed that on Wednesday, the police and Chief Beck in particular, and the brass of LAPD wanted to show that they were in control of the night. And so they came out to be in control of the night. Now, interestingly, you were one of the people that was saying, what the heck are the police doing? And Chief Beck was there, wasn't he, when you were arrested?
He was there. He was not that far away from me. As a matter of fact, we could see each other. So.
And he knows that you're a journalist.
I've interviewed the chief. Yes, I have.
And yet, nothing for you, huh?
No, a lot of mainstream media was able to get out of sort of what they like to refer to as the kettle when they lock you in, when they identified themselves. But then when I identified myself as being a journalist that evening, I just kind of got a little laugh and, yeah, okay, well, tell it to someone else, basically.
And, in fact, even on your paperwork, they indicated that you were a journalist and that they knew you were a journalist.
Yes, they did.
Now, going back to what you're talking about in terms of motivation, with these blogs that you're referring to, what kinds of issues were you raising?
Well, I've had a blog for almost 10 years now, and it seems the past 2 years it's been solely focused on the LAPD. And in this time, there have been several stories that I've written that perhaps a lot of folks in the audience have heard of. There was this issue with Chief Beck and his daughter and a horse. There's this issue about a certain detective's potty mouth in terms of having killed a black LAPD officer some years ago and seemingly having no remorse for it. There was the issue of bringing in the ex-mafia hitman in for a book signing, seemingly sponsored by the LAPD. There was the issue of Ezell Ford and the officers involved in that shooting, and I could go on and on and on. The reason why if anyone even recognizes any of those things that I just mentioned is because I wrote about them first. And then they became sort of mainstream news stories. And I think that is definitely the motivation, because it caused problems for the chief of police. I mean, he had to answer some tough questions, and I'm assuming he didn't appreciate being put in the spotlight like that over some of those issues, especially with the horse, which he, took the time to hold a press conference to talk about how, it was not true and this and that. And then lo and behold, the next day, oh yeah, I did sign that piece of paper authorizing the department to buy my daughter's horse for her to use at work. Yeah. Right.
And so when we look at the retaliation aspect of it, there's some people who obviously have, you get information from your sources.
Mm-hmm.
And there's even been some intimidation attempts with LAPD with that. Can you talk about some of that in terms of what they've done to you, or what kinds of things they've tried to get you caught up in?
Well, I know this is not going to be popular with folks in the audience, but I'm not an anti-police person. And so I do have sources who talk to me, and I listen. And for some of my reporting, yeah, I mean, I've gotten calls from internal affairs trying to get me to talk to them about who my sources are. I often feel like I'm being followed and things are happening to me, but, I'm still here. And I think that, especially lately now with this whole madness around Black Lives Matter and the mayor, that, things will probably get amped up a little bit around that too. But let me be clear, I don't ever feel like it's, and you may disagree, but I don't ever feel like it's the rank and file per se that's after me. I really do believe it's the brass. Like, I believe it's the folks on the 10th floor at LAPD headquarters. I think it's Chief Beck. I think it's some of his deputy chiefs. It's the people who at the end of the day are the ones who are the shot callers, who make these decisions or let these things fly, who then, when Channel 2, 4, or 5 come and knock in, that's when they get upset. When the LA Times starts reporting on it, that's when they get upset.
And so what are we looking for in terms of the future? You have a case, and there's been motions filed, there's been requests for information, some which has been provided and some that we know exists that has not been provided. And we have a trial date that's set. When is your trial set for?
December 15th.
And where is that to be held?
In the criminal court building, downtown Los Angeles on Temple and Broadway.
All right. So that will be happening. No chance that you're going to plead out and cop a plea and plead guilty?
Not a chance.
Prepared to go to trial?
I'm prepared to take it as far as they are and maybe even further.
All right. So that gauntlet has been laid down.
Yeah, you don't plead guilty or take deals when you're innocent. And
sometimes people do.
Sometimes people do, and I've heard of situations where people have. I'm not going to do that because, one thing about me, for people who know me, is that I would never resist arrest, and I don't I wasn't a leader of the protest, as the police are trying to say. The things that they made up are just so absolutely fictitious. The only thing that's missing is once upon a time and they lived happily ever after. It is truly a department fairy tale.
How do people get in touch with you if they want to go to your blog or if they want to reach out to you for any other purpose?
I'm on social media. So my name is spelled Jasmyne. So I'm at Jasmine on Twitter. On Facebook, I have a page. It's Jasmine Cannick. So it's JasmyneCannick. My website is jasmineonline.com. I'm pretty easy to find, so Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or through my website.
All right. Thank you so very much for joining us. And, of course, we'll be giving updates on your case and on all the goings on at that 10th floor at LAPD headquarters.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.